Hi, my name is Michelle Beckshire. I'm an associate attorney here at the office of Beltran, Brito, Casimir.
And I'm Daniel Casimir. I'm one of the partners here at Beltran, Brito, Casimir.
So today we're here to speak about E2 visas.
Sure. So basically the E2 visa, let's talk a little bit about that. We discussed the EB5 visa a few weeks ago, and essentially that's a way to obtain a legal permanent residency in the United States if you make an investment of $500,000 US dollars or $1 million US dollars. That's a process that it's going to get you a green card to live and work here in the United States. That's, a legal permanent residency in the United States. It's going to take, a while. It's going to take a few years to finally obtain the immigration benefit. The E2 visa is a little bit different. The E2 visa, it takes less time to obtain that visa. The investment amount is also lower. Significantly lower. And the purpose is similar to the EB5. It allows you to manage a business here in the United States. Now, the main difference is who can apply. And essentially, the people that can apply are those nationals with passports or nationalities with which the United States has some sort of treaty of commerce with that country.
Right.
So, for instance, the United States and the UK and Canada, they have the treaty for this type of visa. So nationals from Canada, from the United Kingdom, they can go ahead and they can apply for this type of visa.
Right.
If you're from Portugal, for instance, that country does not fall on this list, so you would not be
There's
eligible.
a long list of countries. I mean, on that list there's France, Spain, Italy, so that's something that we'd have to evaluate, right?
Sure. Commonly, we work with dual nationals, people that have nationalities for more than one country. So let's say that you hold a Brazilian or a Portuguese passport, but you might also have a Spanish passport.
Right.
In that event, you would be able to apply using your Spanish passport. So that takes me into who exactly can apply. Obviously, it would be the principal investor. That would be the person that is making the investment in the United States, and then his or her family members. So that would be a spouse, and then children under the age of 21. Something very important to keep in mind is that only the principal investor needs to have the passport from the treaty country. Mm-hmm. So let's say that the investor is a dual national of Brazil and also, let's say, Spain. As long as the principal investor has that Spanish passport, since Spain does have the treaty with the United States, as long as that principal investor has the passport and the nationality, even if his family, let's say spouse and children under 21, don't have that Spanish passport, they only have the Brazilian or the Portuguese passport, they can still go ahead and apply for this type of visa. Right. The rest of the family can still apply. And something that's pretty interesting about this type of visa is that the spouse will have a work authorization. That means that the principal investor, they'll have their investor visa, the family, they'll have the visa that will allow them to accompany the rest of the family into the United States. The spouse is actually eligible to apply for a work authorization that will allow that spouse to, work with the principal investor in the business, or maybe, work at a different company. So it really opens up the opportunities.
Yeah, that's a very big advantage to the E2 visa, is that the spouse is allowed to work.
Yeah, I mean, it really opens up the opportunities for the family members to not only live in the United States but work, and also the children. The children will be eligible to go to school here in the United States to study and pursue their academic careers here in the United States. So what exactly is the E2 visa? How can you qualify for the visa? Aside from having the passport from the country with which the United States has that treaty of commerce, we need to show a few other factors. First off, it needs to be an active business. It needs to be a business that requires day-to-day managerial, supervisory duties from a manager, from a president, etc. So, I always use the example of, let's compare an active business to a passive business. If I purchase a piece of land, and I have that piece of land sitting there hoping that the real estate market will drive up the price, That's a passive business. That's a passive investment. It's not necessarily what would be considered active because it doesn't require somebody overseeing day-to-day
to
operations.
direct and actually develop the company.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, what if we have this piece of land and we've built a ranch on there, and the ranch hosts children's birthday parties, for instance? That's more of an active business because there's an actual business element to it. We're hosting children's birthday parties at this ranch. That's actually an investment that we have done in the past. So that's one way to demonstrate that it is an active business. That's very important because without it being an active business, we can't apply for it. How many investors can be involved in the business? What's the ownership interest? To qualify for the visa, you need to be at least 50% owner of this business. That essentially means that you can have business partners if you'd like. Let's say two business partners, they're 50-50 owners, and they both want to apply for the visa. That's great. They can go ahead and apply for the visa. Now, what if you have one person that's 50% owner and you have two other people that are 25% owners each? That's fine too. But that person or those two owners that are owning 25% of the business, they can't apply for the visa. Maybe you have business partners that are U.S. citizens. Right. They can go ahead and own the other 50%. Maybe you have a business partner that's not interested in the visa. They can go ahead and own the other 50% as well. Mm-hmm. It's not necessary for them to obtain the visa. Just keep in mind that if you do want to obtain the visa, you should be at least 50% owner of that business. What type of businesses qualify? Basically, anything from a startup to a previously existing business that's been purchased here in the United States. It can also be a subsidiary. Let's say that you're a business owner abroad and you'd like to open up offices here in the U.S. This type of visa would allow you to open up that business in the U.S. It could also be a franchise. Basically, if there's a company out there franchising their business model, you can go ahead and obtain this visa if you decide to become a franchisee. So typically those four business models are the most common that we see with this type of visa. Now to the $1 million question. How much money should we invest in order to be able to obtain this visa? So the truth is that U.S. law does not indicate a minimum investment amount. Okay, it's not like the EB-5 that requires you make an investment of $1 million in the United States, for instance. This type of visa, it requires that the amount be sufficient to operate the type of business that you'd like to open in the United States.
Right, so it has to be substantial, but it's going to depend on the type of business.
Sure.
Right?
So, I mean, maybe one business, maybe we have a restaurant, and that restaurant, we can open that up with a $60,000 investment in the United States. That could qualify for the E2 visa. Now, if the investment's a hotel, it's going to have to be a much bigger investment in the United States. So it's really going to depend on the type of investment, the type of business, and essentially, how you want to carry that out. I usually recommend speak with an attorney first to determine, is the ownership percentage okay? Is the investment amount okay? And does this business qualify as active or passive? Obviously, the children's, the ranch with the children's birthday parties, that's a fairly clear-cut example. But not all businesses are that clear-cut. There might be a business that appears to be active that isn't active. That would maybe be considered passive. And vice versa. There might be a business that could be considered passive, or you might consider it passive, but we may be able to make a legal argument that it is, in fact, an active business. So always, I recommend reach out to a lawyer. We'll be able to give you a better idea as to, whether the business qualifies or not. So very important. Where does this business have to be located? Essentially, it can be located anywhere in the United States, as long as it has some sort of principal place of business. That means some sort of administrative office.
Right, so a commercial
location, a commercial address. So recently we worked with some individuals from Canada. We were setting up a talent agency / recording studio in the United States. And the principal place of business, the commercial address, there was obviously the studio where they were setting up their Canadian operations here in the United States. Now, what about a not so traditional business? Let's say, for instance, a food truck. Maybe this food truck doesn't have an actual restaurant that it's associated with, but a business like a food truck, it would qualify for an E2 visa. It's something that we're doing a lot increasingly, especially here in Miami. We're doing a lot more food trucks. I always recommend there should be some sort of administrative office, an office where administrative tasks are handled. Obviously, the nature of the business is operating this food truck. It's providing delicious food for customers, but we also need to have some sort of office where administrative tasks will be handled. So we can give you a little bit better idea what type of business would require this office. The important thing is it's to have some sort of commercial address. Application process. Something that we get a lot is, how do I apply? How long does it take? This is an application that we do usually through the embassy. Obviously, each circumstance is going to be different. It might be possible to do the application here in the United States without leaving the United States, but the vast majority are done directly at the embassy. Usually what we'll do is we'll prepare a packet of about 500 pages with all corporate documents, all evidence of the investment that's been made in the United States, the source of funds, basically where the investor obtained those funds from that they're making the investment with in the United States. We'll prepare about a 500-600 page packet, and then depending on the embassy that you'll be applying from, we'll also prepare a much smaller packet.
Right, so each embassy has different instructions, different requirements, and they want to see the documentation in different ways. So that would be something that would be coordinated with your lawyer to make sure that we're preparing everything appropriate for that embassy.
Sure.
Right.
So
yeah.
it might sound silly, but depending on the embassy, they control the number of pages that we can submit them. So, like I said, we'll create one package that's about 500 to 600 pages, and then a much smaller packet. And the reason that it varies from embassy to embassy, it could be because the room that processes these applications might be a much smaller room in one embassy than another, and they just don't have enough space. So one embassy might require 50 pages. Another embassy might allow us to put up to 100 pages.
Sometimes they want it electronically. Sometimes they want it a physical packet that dropped off at the consulate or mailed. So it just depends.
Yeah. So obviously we'll coordinate with you on that. We know which embassies require this certain presentation method. So we'll go ahead. We'll organize that with you. We'll send off that smaller packet to the embassy in their prescribed form. We'll go ahead and give you a copy of your large packet and also the small packet. And essentially, you'll make an appointment. We'll help you make an appointment at the embassy. You'll present yourself at the embassy, and they'll basically, they'll interview you. They'll ask you about your business. They'll review the packet as well. The entire process from the day we start working together on this until you actually have the visa, a lot of it will depend on you. We've worked with clients that have given us everything that we need within a week. We usually take, with any client, about 14 days to prepare the application once we have everything. Depending on the volume of cases at that particular embassy, you could have an interview a few weeks later. A lot's going to depend on, factors outside of our control. What we can control is how fast we can give you this work product so that you can schedule your interview. Again, the fastest we've done it has probably been about a month and a half. That client had everything in order once we started working, once we were retained on the matter. Other clients have taken a little bit longer. If you're working with a franchise, you're kind of on their time constraints.
To get all the documentation that's necessary.
Exactly. So, each case is going to be different. Our goal is to work with you, make sure that we have everything organized, make sure that we have a winning application that we're going to put forward. So that's basically what we do as lawyers. Aside from preparing the application, we'll also work with you to prepare you for the interview. So we'll prepare you for the interview, the types of questions that can be asked, so that you can get the visa approved and you can start working in the United States.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that this was informative, and if you have any questions about E2 visas,
feel free to reach out.